You are listening to the Dominance Academy podcast, the premier enclave for those who seek mastery in the arts of traditional relationship dynamics and the arcane knowledge of unlocking true leadership. We will explore the influence of desire, the mysteries behind polarity, the darker pathways of intimacy, and now your host, Mr. Justin.
What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. This is the Dominance Academy, and I'm your host, Mr. Justin. And today we're going to get into a topic that I came across on Clubhouse just recently about the mentally equippedness of men when they're getting into relationships. So I wanted to touch on that, and because there's a lot of discussion around guys getting married and shit like that, and you look at the statistics and they're dismal, right? You look at that, the successive relationships, the successive marriages, and there's a lot of things going awry. And then even the stuff that does tend to work out, how successful is it? Just because they're not divorced, does that mean that it's a successful marriage? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Shout out to my guy, Alpha Villains, who made this shirt, right? I'm the space she needed. I love this t-shirt. It's a dick thing to wear to the gym. But yeah, so we're going to be getting into that. And, just a quick announcement. If you haven't heard already, I've got some eBooks up for sale on the website, dominanceacademy.com, so check that out. It's a 3-part series on how to be more attractive, how to increase desire, how to understand desire. And there's some tips and tricks. Some things are quite obvious, but hey, sometimes common knowledge isn't very common. So that's in there. And I'm going to be working on another book that's going to be a bit longer, and it's going to be about how to be a fantastic lover. So we're going to be going over things in that book around foreplay, understanding erogenous zones, squirting, anal sex, dirty talk, training her to come on command, dominance, immersion, how to strengthen your own orgasms, how to have ejaculate-less orgasms. So how to have an orgasm without actually coming. There's a whole bunch of things. So that means you can have more than one. So there's going to be a lot in there. So that's going to be a fun book. It's going to take me a little while though. But the ebooks about attraction and desire, those are available. They are available. So check those out at dominanceacademy.com. So back to the topic, most guys are ill-equipped to be in a relationship. It was a group of people talking about, first started about asking whether women should propose, and because there's just a lot of women that I think in the future are going to be left behind. They're going to be left without partners. No one's really choosing them, and so they might have to take it on their own responsibility to say, hey, I want to get married, so I'm going to choose a guy to marry. And this really might be the case in the future. Who knows? But and if it comes down to that, they might have to be the leader in that situation as well. So that's something that they need to consider. But it moved into talking about what can happen and different relationships, how they progress. And I'm of the mind that a lot of people are just ill-equipped. And if men are leaders, right? So if we accept a certain aspect of the conversation and say, all right, well, men are leaders, then the future of the relationship cannot be blamed on women. Okay? So, and if a lot of relationships are going down the tubes, then one must assume that the man is ill-equipped to lead a relationship, to be in a relationship. And this is kind of the angle that I come at this situation. And so then you have to ask, well, why are so many guys wanting to get into relationships if they have a history of them falling apart? And so I would say that this is due to a lack of self-awareness, or a strong lack of self-awareness, because when, you know, there's this old adage that says the poor carpenter who blames his tools. And so it's the poor man who blames the woman when their relationship goes left. Okay, like you have to take ownership. So if you're going to claim that you are a leader, then you also have to claim the responsibility that happened, or for everything that happens in that relationship. You can't say, well, it was her fault. No, man, it's your fault. If that ship sinks, you're the craftsman of the ship as well as the captain. So, you know, you can't really say that it's a woman's fault. Okay, if she's not following, all right, that's one thing, but it's your fault for keeping her around. All right. Shout out to you guys who are watching right now in the chat. Duke Lux, I see you. Uncle Guns, King Ken, Troy Scott. Thank you guys for pitching in here. Appreciate you. So the question then moves to, well, if men are ill-equipped, why are they ill-equipped? Okay, and yeah, we could say that guys are not taught this, you know, and that could be very well a major factor, that they're not taught what to do because of a weak father or a non-present father, and that's certainly a factor to consider. But there are other things, because you could have men driving down relationships and they did have fathers, okay, and they were probably learning to emulate that guy. So you've got a domino effect of the blind leading the blind, and then you've got other situations where, and this is where I think the biggest issue is you've got guys who are not understanding their emotional states. They're not understanding their psychological states, and they've not dealt with anything that can pose a problem. Okay, so they then go into relationships with these, you know, unattended to psychological problems, and because they're not so bad that they're ruining their lives. So it's not like they've got these terrible psychological problems and it's leading them into ruin. They're living in a box under a bridge. They have no relationships of any kind. Their family has disowned them, and they're a heroin addict. Like, it's not that bad, okay? But it's bad enough to where the flow of a relationship isn't moving very well, and there's a lack of trust on her part. For example, he's not leading, he's not growing, and he's afraid to look at the crap that's inside him, or he doesn't even know that it's there to look at. And this, I think, is one of the major problems of guys. They'll just say, I'm fine. Okay, they're like, I got this, I'm fine. They watch a few Andrew Tate videos and they're like, I'm good, I can be just like a top G, I'm gonna talk like him, I'm gonna move like him, I can be bossy. And it's really not about that. It has nothing, leading a relationship has nothing to do with being a dictator. Okay, leading a relationship starts with how you lead yourself. That's where it all begins. It all begins with how you lead yourself. And in order to properly lead yourself, you have to know who you are. And this isn't just about what you define. Okay, so yes, on one side of it, you need to define what that is. You have to have a clearly mapped out and understood constitution, okay, which is the bodying document that provides the framework from which you move, the way you it creates the vision for your life moving forward. Okay, and for anyone else who joins that life. Okay, so it's fine on one hand to have that sorted out, Okay. And that's the good stuff. Okay. Having self-knowledge also has a lot to do with knowing what's in the darkness, knowing what's in those dark corners. If you've got trauma in your life, if say you've got like abandonment issues, or you had an abusive parent in your past, where are your skeletons, and what are they? Have you really taken any sort of time to look into that and try to understand it? And I'm not saying that you should spend years in therapy or anything like that, but you can't go into relationship with yourself, let alone a relationship with another person, without first having some kind of understanding of who you are on a more complete level. Okay, now you're not going to know everything. That's just what life is. You tend to discover things as you move along in an introspective way. Okay, but you got to start somewhere. You can't just go into things and hope for the best, having not examined anything of yourself and only done the parts where you're deciding what you're going to create. Okay, so it's kind of like if you've done any work with like construction. Okay, they're not just looking at the plans. Okay, yes, that's a major part of it. They're looking at the architectural plans for the building. All right, but they also have to have engineers come through and look at the lands that they're building it on. All right, they have to look at the soil. They have to go deeper into the soil to see, like, say you're building a skyscraper. They got to know what the bedrock is like. Is there any plumbing in there? Are there any natural water lines going down in there, or water reserves? Like, they have to make sure that the foundation is okay. Now, at a glance, you could look at it and go, yeah, look, it's fine. It's just like a nice big dirt lot. It looks okay. But you cannot just go with what you see and consider it fine and assume that building a structure on top of it is going to be okay. That's not the smart way to go about it. The smart way to go about it is what they do, and they survey the land and they do an investigation into what's underneath to make sure that what they build is going to be sound, that it can stand on its own without having any problems in the future. Because they dig these giant pylons that go way deep into the ground, and they have to make sure that it's safe to do that. All right. And so the same sort of thing has to apply to your own understanding. You cannot just focus on the architecture. You need to have it, but that's not the only aspect. You really need to understand who you are, and that includes the shit that's under the soil. Because that's where the things that will ruin your relationship, that's where they come from. I mean, it can also come from having a weak design, all right? But if you've got a great design, but an uninvestigated and shitty foundation, then you're bound to fail. There's no way out of it. So this is really where guys are ill-equipped to deal with relationships. And so what happens is when you don't examine any of these things, they will come to the surface. Okay, these things will rise to the surface eventually, because when you're integrating your life and you're interacting with a woman on a regular basis, things do come up. And some of these things that come up can be triggering. They can be triggering to things on the subconscious level. And next thing you know, like classic example is you're fighting over bullshit like, who organizes the cupboard better, or, she left her panties on the floor, or just weird stuff. Okay, like on the surface stuff, but it results in a fight that's beyond what the situation calls for. So it's like a level 9 fight over a level 4 infraction, and it just doesn't make any sense. It's not lining up. So that leads me to believe that there's other things that are kind of making their way into the conversation that are more on a subconscious level. And this happens time and time again. It's like routinely, there will be your undealt with, unknown psychological bullshit that will come to the surface. And if you don't have the wherewithal to examine these things and to look at them plainly without getting defensive, without getting emotional, without getting passive aggressive, without projecting, just looking at things as they are, and when they come up, then you're going to be okay. Like, you have to have the ability to do this. If you don't have the ability to look at things as they are, then it's going to lead to even more suffering. And this is where, and you keep doing it over and over, right? Because guys are really adaptive. Well, humans in general are very adaptive. But if you look at statistics, and I'm not the biggest statistic watcher, but if you look at situations across the board, men are more willing to stay in a bad relationship than a woman is. Now, that's not to say that she's any smarter, because that too is a reaction to the things that are coming up in relationship. That's a way of not dealing. That's a way of coping, right? I don't want to deal with the bullshit that's coming up that's triggering my subconscious problems. And so instead of dealing with them, I'm just going to bounce. And so, but that's something that I would almost expect a woman to do, is to not face things head on. All right. Now it's up to you as the leader, who is teaching her through proxy, right? By observing, by being next to you and watching how you deal with these things. That's how it's supposed to be dealt with. All right. So instead of freaking out, instead of getting angry, instead of getting overly emotional, instead of being passive aggressive, instead of projecting things back onto her, that's when you are teaching her that this is the behavior that's expected in the relationship. So you can handle yourself. And then you're also teaching her this is how things are handled. And you then handle her in the same way. All right? Because she will have her emotional upsets. She will freak out about certain things sometimes. Okay? She will, just, that's the nature of women. They're volatile, and they're sometimes chaotic. And that's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes sometimes, right? And that's okay. That's just the nature of women, right? We can't expect trees to grow in a straight, nice, clean, narrow row. It's just not the way it goes, all right? Nature is a bit chaotic. So, but it's up to us to set the example. And if two people are volatile, if two people are chaotic, if two people can easily rock their own boat, then you can't expect things to be moving smoothly going forward. That's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. So it's incumbent upon the man to set the precedent. And this requires you having a greater understanding of where your fear is, where your pain is, where your trauma is. If you've got anxieties, if you've got anger problems, if you've got rage problems, okay? These things have to be understood and dealt with, because they will come out. They will come out on the other person. Shit, I think I might have... I just got to check my appointments. Oh, never mind. Okay. So, I thought I'd fudged an appointment that I had, but that's not until later. All right. Anyways, so they will come out. And, I had a situation with a client, and he didn't have this part of him checked. He didn't have he had some anger, and it came out on his woman, and it freaked the hell out of her. Like, it really did. And these are people who were a little bit, getting their feet wet into BDSM. So, a little bit of like testing the edge is to be expected, but things went a little far this one moment, and it really threw the whole relationship for a loop, because it threw her for a loop, and he had to come to terms with that part of himself, that it was something that had to be dealt with. And this is really important, and that's just a part of it. Like, you cannot be an effective leader if you are harboring fear, anxiety, rage, anger, because if you don't deal with that, it's gonna come out. It's gonna come out, and that woman is gonna be the recipient of those things, or you're gonna take it out on yourself. And so this is just, it's a terrible, terrible concoction moving forward. And so you think to yourself, okay, so, how many men are really attending to their mental well-being? How many men are engaging in therapy? How many men are dealing with, hiring coaches? If you look at the vast majority of guys, like, they're not doing this. They're not tending to their internal well-being. And it's the funny part is, like, yes, they'll work their asses off. They'll work so hard to create an external life that someone could depend on. But it's just ironic that the person who's doing it is so fragile. And they rely on those external things in order to make them feel stronger. Right? And I'm not saying you shouldn't go and do those things. Like, that's great. Like, go achieve anything in this life that you want to achieve, right? I encourage you to do that. But, usually we're dealing with the unexamined individual. And this will lead to further suffering. This is why, like, you hear people say, well, in order to have a woman, in order to have a good marriage, in order to attract women and keep them and all that stuff, you have to have the LMS, right? The looks, money, and status. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then why do these same people get divorced? Right? I mean, there's celebrities and sports stars and people like this. They get divorced left and right. Okay. And this is because it's the person who created those things that needs to be attended to. But just, you got to know, like, this is what will bring you down. It's not whether you have money or don't have money. It's not whether you're good looking or not good looking. It's not whether you're famous or you're a recluse. It's who is doing those things or not doing those things, not what is done and not done. And that makes the biggest impact, because it's the day-to-day. And it's like, someone who's like this, they have a habit, a guy has a habit of sweeping things under the rug. Okay, this becomes a natural habit of his, and it starts with himself. So something will come up, whatever it is, all right? And he'll just sweep these things under the rug. He won't deal with it. So this becomes a learned behavior way early on, okay? And then they keep growing up. They become a young man, and then an older man, and so on. Now he's this fully grown man, and he still has these learned behaviors of sweeping that he picked up when he was a child, or that when he developed as a child. So now he's this grown man, and he's coping with things the way he did when he was a child. And he sweeps things under the rug, and this is his way of dealing with conflict. This is his way of dealing with internal conflict. Something's bothering me. I'm not going to speak on it. I'm not going to address it. I'm just going to sweep it under the rug. This will cause a cancer in the self, which then extends into the relationship. Because for the same minds that cannot address these things within the self will also have an issue addressing things in the relationship. He will be either avoidant or he'll be explosive. Okay. So these guys who sweep things under the rug, either they have a very high tolerance and they just kind of let things be and they grow up this huge pile, or they have a certain tolerance level where it gets to a point and then they snap. Okay. And when a guy snaps, when he cannot take putting things off for time after time after time, and this turns into an explosion. And it could be a verbal explosion, or God forbid, it's a physical explosion. And now we're dealing with a guy who's got a case of domestic abuse. Okay. And then it's like, he will likely then blame the woman. He'll say, well, she provoked me. Okay. There wouldn't be any of that if you had attended to all of that stuff in you from the get-go. Okay. So it's like, why are guys even getting into relationships in the first place? Yep. Uncle Gun says, facts. If you have bad habits, bad behaviors with yourself, you will carry those things outside of you. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Picasso, he said, the future of every painting is determined by the first stroke. So it's, it's imperative that if you want to if you have a goal, right? And not all guys have this, but if you have a goal of creating some kind of legacy, okay, if you have this vision of having a wife and a family and something that extends into the future, it must begin with you. You have to clean up your backyard. You have to. You cannot just say, I'll figure it out, I'll deal with it. Okay, because that's what a lot of guys do. They'll I bring this up a lot. They'll have a cavity in their tooth, and it could have been taken care of when it was a little speck. Okay, but they're gonna wait it out and wait it out and wait it out, and then before you know it, they're half the tooth is rotted, and now they need a root canal and a huge crown, and it's more money, more time, more discomfort, and when you could have dealt with it when it was just this tiny dot on your tooth, right? But this is the way a lot of guys operate. Okay, like they know they've got a problem in their car, right? It's shifting weird. There's something going on with the transmission. You feel it, you hear it, and it's been going on for weeks now. And then boom, the transmission drops and you're stuck on the road. And you got to call AAA. And now you're going to go fix it because you have no choice. Don't wait until you have no choice to fix something when you know there's an issue. This is not good leadership. It's good leadership addressing things right when they are apparent. Okay? Because that's what having the skill with yourself is what is going to allow you to do this in your relationship, right? Because that's where the beginnings of fearlessness start. The beginnings of fearlessness starts with dealing with yourself, dealing with your demons and your skeletons and your shadow, all right? Dealing with the darker side of your ego. This is where the beginnings of fearlessness comes into play. This is where real courage happens. And when you face these parts of yourself, it absolutely changes you. It's like going to the gym, but internally. And you gain a lot of confidence from this. And then you no longer have any sort of fear or discomfort when dealing with other people. And you can deal it with their stuff calmly and rationally. And so, when a woman is misbehaving or she's going through something, and they will, okay? Don't think just because you found a submissive woman that she's going to be behaving herself 100% of the time. This is not the case. And I even know people who are in like a, classic BDSM master-slave type relationship. They've been together for years and still the woman has her occasional, misbehaving, either consciously or unconsciously, all right? Because they're just volatile beings. They're not robots. As well behaved as they can be, there's going to be flare-ups from time to time, all right? And God bless them, because I've been in situations where things have been too perfect, and it's quite boring, frankly. I like giving out spankings every now and then when necessary. What's up, Kevin is in 7? Good to see you, man. Yeah, I like to give a spanking. There's nothing like giving a well-deserved spanking. It doesn't hit the same when she's like, "Daddy, can I have a spanking?" Like, those are fun too, and it's great that a woman knows herself where she needs to feel that force, right? She needs to feel that masculine force from you, and whatever sort of physical thing, emotional thing that she gets from receiving the act. But it's totally different when you know that and she knows that it's a situation that needs correction, and she's like, "Oh shit, like, I know I fucked up," and you're like, yeah, I know you have too. So when you get home later, there's gonna be this is gonna be dealt with, and you just describe what's gonna happen, when it's gonna happen, and then take care of it. But yeah, so it's like that. You don't have to be spanking your woman if that's not the dynamic you have. But if you do want to learn about domestic discipline, get in touch with me, and we can have a chat, about how to bring that into your relationship. I've done a lot of research on the matter, and there's quite a bit of stability in relationships that have domestic discipline. And this doesn't mean, the guy just hauling off like whenever he wants. It's if he has any sort of sadistic tendencies that, he needs to keep those in control, because that's part of understanding his shadow as well. Okay. So there, like I said, it's like being a leader is very involved. It's very involved. Like, it's not just like, oh, you get to wear this special hat and now everything's great, everything's copacetic, and she just does what you tell her to, and everything's cool. Like, it sounds good, like when people talk about it like that, but it's not. It's constant management. It's constant observation and analysis. Like, if anyone's been a business owner where you're actually tracking your progress, okay, and you're running your numbers and trying to do projections and things of that nature, and you're really looking at things, this is how you have to treat it, okay? Or anyone who's ever taken bodybuilding seriously, where you're tracking all of your nutrients. You've got a micro scale in your kitchen, and you're weighing out all of your food, and you're keeping track of all your macros and all your vitamins and minerals, all of your supplements. And it's like there's a big difference between that kind of seriousness, that kind of approach, versus somebody who just has a general idea of, like, eating healthy and then working out like 3 times a week. Like, sure, he's gonna be fine living that way, but to have like a really a lot of growth, okay, in order to have that growth, it requires a lot of analysis, a lot of data capture, and a lot of management. And it's like, if you're all fucked up about some stuff, you're not going to be able to do this in your relationships. You're not going to be able to lead at all. You're not going to be able to be influential. Yet guys so badly in their hearts want to be influential, right? Because that's their ego talking. And yeah, truth be told, it feels good. It feels good when you can confidently say, do something without any fear, without any sort of discomfort. And she says, yes, sir, I'd be happy to. Like, it feels good when that happens, okay? And I get it, like, guys want to have that, okay? But it doesn't come free. Like, nothing's free. You don't get a free lunch. You don't get a free woman. You don't get free obedience. This is something that you absolutely have to maintain, which means you have to maintain yourself. And if you're maintaining yourself, the you that's doing it had better be clean. All right? That's just the way it works. Lux, I don't recall like what, I don't know what this is in relation to, but isn't that because you're a little sadistic? I think. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I misread that. Yes, I am a little bit sadistic. Okay, so, but I'm also not so much. Like, I know this Dom, like, he's like a hard sadist, and just because it suits his fancy, he will grab his wife and just bend her over the couch and just haul off on her thighs and her ass, and she won't even know why. Right? However, she's just equally masochistic. So it's like two puzzle pieces fitting together, and they have an understanding, right? Of course, they both have their limits, but it's beyond what I would consider reasonable. But I can't say that's wrong for them, okay? Like, they've been together for years, and they're super happy and super, like, locked in together. Like, mentally, they're both on the same page. But yeah, it's not for me. You know, I'm not going to be one to just haul off because I want to, because I don't want my sadism to control me, right? I'm a huge proponent of not allowing your impulses to control your decisions. And now you can't control all of that, because some of your impulses are subconscious, and you can't have full awareness of your entire subconscious, but you can do your best, right? It means, like, you know, you don't want to just leave it unexamined, right? You got to try. So, you know, while that is a strong part of me, you know, I don't want to have any of my impulses controlling my behaviors. I just don't find that to be a healthy way to be. But yeah, let's see here. What do you got here? Dukalux asks, I saw a comment yesterday about a recovering nice guy that thought he doesn't know how to dominate was his failure. What's my take? Are nice guys not able to dominate? Nice guys, okay, nice guys are not a type of guy. All right, so first off, let's just clear that up. Nice guy is a syndrome, okay? It's a pathology that many men are afflicted with, all right? It's not an identity. But the thing is that a lot of guys are with this affliction for so long that they think it's their identity, and they just identify themselves as a nice guy, but really they have a syndrome, okay? And their behaviors are just a result. They're symptom of that syndrome. So to answer your question, yes, I think every guy can have the capacity to be more forthright and become more dominant, and to be more grounded, more of a leader, provided they don't have those layers getting in the way. And the layers, I mean, is like the nice guy syndrome. There's a number of layers, and within the nice guy syndrome, there are layers that create the nice guy syndrome, okay, that comprise the nice guy syndrome. And then there's layers beneath that of the things that created it in the first place. All right. So it's not an easy thing to do if a guy has nice guy syndrome. A lot of my clients do have this, just because, you know, it's because it's just a common affliction in Western society. So it's a pretty common thing that I come across, and they have a lot of work in front of themselves, you know, but it's something that has to be reminded of them pretty regularly, and saying, hey, you know, remind yourself why you're here, why you're doing this, because when you're taking apart and you're dismantling nice guy syndrome, part of it is coming to the realization that you've not treated yourself very well, that there's a very low amount of self-respect. And this doesn't feel good. When a guy comes to the understanding that they have very little respect for themselves, it kind of feels like shit. So on top of feeling like shit about being a nice guy and not getting the things that you want, you now feel like shit because you've now realized that you've created this whole thing, that you are your own problem, and there are factors that have led up to it. And some of them were your own choice, and some of them were conditioned into you. So it once they get like a larger picture of the whole structure, it becomes extremely daunting sometimes. And I haven't had any guys duck out, but they come to this understanding of this bigger picture and go, holy shit, like I have so much work to do before I can even think about being super, super comfortable in my own skin, standing on my own feet, and calmly giving the commands that I want to give, and having belief and understanding behind those commands, besides my feelings, besides wanting to be loved and wanting to be cared for and cherished and all this stuff that is part of nice guy syndrome. So if guys want to understand the syndrome better, grab up No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. It's required reading for all of my students, and it's one of the first things that they get into, because he puts it so succinctly. He spent his entire career dealing with nice guy syndrome, and so I couldn't put it better. So I have these guys just dive right into that book, because it really shows the patterns and takes it apart, and then he's got some really good exercises on like how to turn the direction around so that the focus is more on caring about the self, respecting the self, and dismantling certain patterns. But it's not until that's gone can you actually be dominant, right? Because it has to come from a clean place. It's the same logic that love follows, right? So I'm of the belief and understanding that a man can't actually love a woman if he's got certain psychological things going on inside him that is causing neediness, causing attachment, and things of that nature. Because what that's going to do is it's going to contaminate what he thinks is love. And you actually cannot love a woman if you're attached to her, if you're emotionally, psychologically attached to her, if you're afraid, right? Because these things create fears and anxieties, right? Attachment breeds suffering. So it's not until you are able to just, hold a woman in the palm of your hand instead of grasping at her, all right, that you can actually love her and actually appreciate her. And there can't be any fear at all of losing her, all right? Because that fear is usually tied to attachment, of like what it's going to do to you, what it's going to do to your feelings, and what that means. And usually it ties all the way back to self-rejection. Before it gets there, it ties into rejection by her, and then that in turn is, on a deeper level, is rejection of the self. So it's a multi-layered thing. Guys come in and like, hey, show me how to do this stuff. And it's like, I could, I can say, all right, do this with your woman, do that with your woman, say this, draft up this, have her read that. And it's really, if she takes to it, it's only going to be short term, right? It's like somebody's tired and you're like, oh, here, have a Red Bull. And then they wake up and they're like, oh, cool, I'm out, and they're off running, and then it wears off, and they're like, oh, I'm tired again. It's like, well, let's just take a moment and understand why you're routinely tired. Like, what is your rest like? What is your diet like? Do you have any exercise? Do you have any like underlying conditions? We gain another better understanding of what's causing the tiredness, and then you can really run after you figure all that shit out, But it's like, are you prepared to do the work? That's really what it comes down to. Are you prepared to do the work? And frankly, it's extremely difficult to do this on your own. Now, I'm not trying to, promote my services here, but I'm pointing out the fact that you cannot know all of your own dark corners, because the ego habitually tries to protect itself. So that includes that includes hiding oneself from the self. So like a lot of times when you start looking, it starts receding even more, because the ego wants to survive. It wants to protect itself. It doesn't like to be examined. It doesn't like to be taken apart. All right. And it will do things to fight against that. It will actually enact certain things to prevent you from going inward. Okay. So this is where it helps to have guidance, because the guide can bring you to these places by asking certain questions that you're not ready for, that you're not prepared for, right? So then it's it's harder to deflect. It's harder to bypass them. It's harder to justify certain ways of thinking, because if you're trying to pose these questions to yourself, then you can easily, play mental gymnastics and avoid the situation altogether. And then you just say, all right, I'm fine. But a guide, a coach, or even a therapist isn't going to allow you to do that. Okay, we're going to hold your feet to the proverbial fire. So yes, I'll just post this because I'm in full support. I'm actually considering getting certified by him. He has his own certification program. So, I'm considering going out to his ranch and getting certified by Robert Glover. So I would be a certified nice guy coach. And even though I'm already a nice guy coach, it would just be cool to have a certification by him, because he is so very well known. And, people like to see the framed document on the wall, regardless of the fact that it's just a piece of paper with ink on it. But anyways, all right, I'm going to bounce out of here. I am hungry. I haven't had my lunch. So, just wanted to touch on this notion from this Clubhouse conversation about guys being ready for marriage and all this stuff. And, just understand that most guys are not. Most guys are not prepared. They don't even understand what is entailed in a marriage or in a relationship, committed relationship. Okay, it asks a lot of you. It requires a lot of you, and if you don't, really know what that is, and if you're just in it chasing pleasure, you're gonna fuck up. You're gonna fuck up so hard if you're in it just chasing pleasure. You're in it just there for the good times, without understanding who it is that's actually trying to grab the wheel of that ship. Okay. So, like always, if you have any questions, you can find me on Instagram. I've changed my IG handle. It's the dominance.academy. I didn't like that underscore in there. So it's the dominance.academy on Instagram. And you can email me at justin@thedominanceacademy.com. And, as always, go check out the website, thedominanceacademy.com. There's various forms of coaching on there, various monthly programs, and each with different benefits. And then I've also got the mini ebook series that I've created. There's 3 parts to it, or you can just purchase them all in one go, and you save per book when you do it that way. Okay, until next time, I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Take it easy.